people know when they're watching an ad. That's one of the great things about PR is that it doesn't feel contrived in the same way an ad does. It comes across very different than an ad. And I think podcasts versus a long form video that's super produced are that same thing. It feels a lot more genuine, and people are really responding to raw content now.
Welcome to The Format by Chorus Studios. Technology is always changing, and so is the format, or how we produce and consume media. The Format is a monthly newsletter on Substack and a podcast, where I, Flo of Chorus Studios, talk to you, producers, co-hosts, founders, about the newest and the best practices in podcasting today and tomorrow. From technique to technology, we will explore what new AI tools are podcasters using and why. How to prep for a podcast interview as a host or a guest. Which mics are best for your budget? And even, what happens in your brain when you listen to a podcast? These are all questions I will be asking on The Format. This series will allow me an opportunity to continue learning and growing as a podcast producer and share those learnings with you. So I hope you'll join me on The Format on Substack. All right, so today I'm really excited to release an episode with an incredible PR guru, Elliot Tomaeno, founder and CEO of ASTRSK PR. I got connected with him through my friend Chris Gorges, so thank you, Chris. If you know me, you know I love startups and innovation. I was excited that Elliot was interested in being on my show because Elliot has worked with some of my favorite startups, some of the coolest new innovative companies on the planet Earth. So who is Elliot? He founded ASTRSK in 2012, but previous to that was the head of consumer technology at Morrison King Agency. Throughout his 15 years in PR, Elliot has held leadership roles at InLoop, Windstrom, to name a few. He has been featured on Business Insider's Top 50 PR Professionals list 7 years running, as well as Adweek's 30 Under 30 in 2015. Through ASTRSK, Elliot has helped launch and support more than 800 startups, including innovative brands like Groupon, Prime Video, THINX, Misfits Market, Lemonade, Squarespace. So, you want to give an interview like one of these startup founders? He's the one to go to. In this episode, we're going to get into a lot of very tangible techniques you can use to help yourself give an incredible interview that represents you, your true values and personality, as well as your business. Let's get going.
Hey, Flo, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Happy Friday.
Thank you. You too. Are you at home in Brooklyn? Or I don't know where you live in Manhattan.
I'm actually in our house out east in East Hampton right now. So I'll be out here most of the summer, but I'm in the city every other week or so. Have to pop in the office.
I just wanted to say I'm really flattered that you were interested in joining me. You have some pretty big name clients that I'm familiar with, like Getaround, THINX, and Lemonade Insurance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I use Lemonade for my dog.
Oh, amazing.
And I own THINX, and I worked at Getaround, so.
Love that. I'm sure we have even more connections than we even know, because I haven't updated our clients on our website in a second. It's always like the cobbler needs new shoes.
Yes.
Is the phrase.
Oh, I know. Tell me about it. I've got such great guests. I've got to get my act together. If I was consistent, it could be so successful.
Well,
but
if this is
hard.
you without your act together, Flo, you're doing pretty well.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, as I was looking through your roster of clients, is there a theme, or are you can pretty much do it all for anybody?
We really started in tech. I started my career at Facebook, Eventbrite, and Groupon. And so I started in consumer tech for most of my life. The agency is 12 years old now. About 7 years ago, we started doing more lifestyle. So now it's lifestyle, B2B. Then we did some films like Ex Machina and the Steve Jobs film, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And now we've expanded into luxury with our hotel in Costa Rica, Sendero, and a luxury skincare line called McCreen Active. So we're kind of agnostic at this point. For us, the theme is really innovation. Somebody who's doing something different within their space, something that's not been done before, challenger brands. And so we tend to work with venture-funded startups. Those are the types of companies that are really taking on industries. We say we like to partner with rebellious brands, and that tends to be the makeup of most startups.
That is so true. Do you work with comms teams on like their brand archetype?
Definitely. When you're starting with an early stage company, which is used to be about 80% of my business, now it's about 20%. But that early stage company is so much fun to work with because you can really help them shape their narrative and put together a whole communications strategy and really build their voice right from the get-go, which is really fun. You can be a little bit sillier. You can be a little bit more risk-taking and be a little bit more rebellious. So I tend to have my most fun working on those types of comm strategies. But I love the challenge of working with a late stage brand and inserting that fun and quirkiness and that startup mentality into a business that maybe has thousands of employees.
Yes. There's been so many stories now of these startups that were like in the garage, grungy, edgy, eating ramen, and then now they're like huge corporations. And so the public, I think, understands that evolution.
Definitely.
So I think it's fine if you start out communication style, like if you have a podcast or something or a YouTube channel, could be very authentic and like homemade. As long as you have a compelling product or case for your business, there's a reason for it to exist and you're authentic. I feel like people aren't going to look back on that content and be like, they aren't professional or something. Like it's part of the journey, right?
If you look at some of those old videos of Mark Zuckerberg, he had a very different communication style than he does now when he's coached by many people and has shareholders and a board. It can go wrong in some cases. And a lot of times, unfairly, it goes wrong for women, where there's this cult of personality and media builds them up and then can tear them down. But there's the case of Adam Newman as well, this really eccentric founder. You think about the Theranos founder. You think about Sophia from Girl Boss. I forgot what her first company was. Sophia Amoroso, Nasty Gal.
Nasty Gal, yeah.
And she's had a comeback, which is great. And she actually really addressed a lot of this stuff. But I think there is a challenge if you come across too strong or too quirky that you could take attention away from the problem that you're trying to solve. That's always this balance that we try to work on with founders. And especially when they go onto podcasts, because a podcast is a place where it's a longer format and you don't have as much control over what comes out and what's included. Often everything's included. Certain founders aren't really a great fit for podcasts. Most are, but there's certain founders that I might say, hey, this is probably not the right medium for you if you're unable to rein in some of these eccentricities, or if you're unable to not share the product roadmap of the company that we're not allowed to share yet. Some founders just have a hard time not spilling it all. There are some founders that aren't a great fit for podcasts, but it's few and far between. I'd say it's only 5 to 7% of my clients. We've got about 40 clients, and each of them have 2 or 3 people who could be on podcasts. So out of those hundreds of people, there's only maybe a handful that I would recommend to skip podcasts for the time being.
I don't know if that would be a tough conversation to have, but it's one that that's your job, is to like be real with people and help them protect the brand. And
100%. And sometimes we as the PR team are the only person that will say that to them because they're usually the boss within the company. And it is a hard conversation sometimes. But I think that's why we become such trusted partners with our clients, because we're able to say those tough things. We're able to have those hard conversations and really explain our rationale behind it and help them understand that this is all in protection of the brand and their personal brand.
I love that. I feel like it's just like anything in life. If you have a reputation of being open and honest, people will just expect that and they'll be okay with it. And I think if you just maintain that value system, I'm open and honest with all my clients. So, this is me, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a good thing rather than like tiptoeing around what people
100%. And you can make the same point by tiptoeing around and spend an hour on a phone call. But a CEO doesn't have that time either. I think one of the things that people really appreciate about me and my team is that bluntness and just getting right to the point.
I love that. Okay, so I have one more question before we get into our plan questions. So as we were just talking about, deciding how much you want a founder or a CEO or whoever the faces of the brand are to be up front. For Getaround, for example, like Jessica is pretty well known. She's been in a lot of features in magazines, but it's not an extreme case. Obviously, Apple and Elon Musk, Tesla, like it's the first thing people think of. And in terms of podcasting, I think it definitely does bring out the personalities behind these companies, like having a CEO on a show. Can you talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of that, or like how you think about that in terms of positioning individuals to represent companies?
Definitely. So it's a mix of what's going to be best for the brand and what's going to be best for that person. And when I say what's best for the brand, it's not just what's going to make the brand shine in the best light, but also is that person taking time away from crucial business objectives or crucial parts of the business to spend doing media? For example, a lot of our founders are engineer founders, and so they're actually building the product. If you're in the middle of building and doing PR and doing podcasts is going to take time away from crucial product features that you need to ship, that's a conversation we need to have, and perhaps there's a better spokesperson in the interim. So most of the companies that we work with do have 3 to 5 different people. We call it like a spokesperson bench, and different people are set up to talk about different things. And usually that's their domain expertise. So founder will speak to the top tier media, CMO will speak to the ad and the marketing trades, CTO will speak to some more of the tech and the business media. And then we may have like a head of business development, a head of sales, a COO that is really close to the business and can talk to all the same things that the CEO can talk to, but has more time to be able to do that. And so sometimes that COO will become more of the face of the company. And then it's about what stage of the company too. I think you'll probably notice if you look back, Jessica was more the face of the company earlier on. And then there was more people brought in to be the spokesperson bench. And there were definitely some strategic reasons to do that. And partially, I think it's about where she wanted to spend her time and where her time is most valuable for the company.
I thought that there probably was a bench of representatives. And it's interesting to hear from like an insider's perspective.
It's interesting if you have a brother-sister duo, or for example, Mimi Chang's won our pro bono contest, and they are a dumpling company, and they have 3 locations in New York City, and they love doing interviews together. And that's a rare one where we really want to see how they do together before we recommend going forward with that, because it can be a little challenging to do interviews with 2 people at the same time. But they're sisters, they know exactly who's going to jump onto which question, they've got a flow, and it works really well for them. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to spokespeople.
Cool. All right, let's talk a little bit about what this episode is really about, which is how you help your clients who are preparing to be on a show as a guest. What are some top line things they must know, and then other things maybe you do to help them prepare?
I'm just giggling because for some of them, it's like, make sure you're caffeinated. I just poured myself a little Celsius. I love that. We're both ready. We start way before the interview, and usually we're doing media training with them from the beginning when we start working with them. So they have gone through multiple rounds of media training, and there's different types of media training that we do for broadcasts, for podcasts, for written interviews, for phone interviews. And for each one of those formats, we recommend a different set of tips. So a lot of our clients will have already gone through this media training and message management exercise, and I'll act like the journalist and I'll run them through a mock interview, ask them questions. Sometimes we'll stop along the way and say, hey, we could have expanded more here, or this would have been an opportunity to shift the question and kind of answer around the question to be able to hit the point that you wanted to hit. But with podcasts, we take all that message management and we tell them to throw it out the window. This is not about getting quick sound bites. A podcast is really about taking a deeper dive, take a breath, and take the time, because this medium allows for a deeper conversation. And the best podcasts, especially business podcasts, are when business leaders are able to be a little bit more vulnerable and share that behind the scenes of how things came together. If you think about one of the biggest business podcasts in the world, How I Built This, these founders on How I Built This are sharing intimate parts of their life while they were building their company. And the most interesting episodes are those in which the founders share their struggles when they felt like they were failing. The crazy story about how they almost didn't make payroll the night before they raised their biggest round of funding and became the biggest name in streetwear or whatever their industry is. So we tell them to throw out all of that message management and those short sound bites and come to the table ready to tell stories. Like tactically, I think one of the things that we tell them, and we'll go kind of more into the vulnerability after this, but tactically, it's so important that they're in the right headspace. So I'll often tell our founders, you're having a really bad headspace day, even if it's the biggest podcast in the world, you have to reschedule. Because if you're not able to be present, you're not going to come across in the right way, and this is going to be a waste of your time. And perhaps we may position the brand in the wrong light, or you may come across as not excited to be doing what you're doing. And we really want their passion to come through on all of these interviews. But tactically, what we share to them is make sure you're in the right headspace, get a lot of sleep the night before, make sure you're caffeinated, but not too caffeinated if you drink caffeine, and then try to not spend any time doing administrative tasks that day, and try not to be in spreadsheets or working in deep work, at least for the hour before the podcast. And so if somebody said, well, what should I do? I said, go around to your team and talk to different departments of your company, ask them about their weekend, share with them a personal story about when you had a challenge when you were at their level, really have conversations, that hour beforehand. And then 5 to 10 minutes beforehand, if you can, and you feel comfortable meditating, or I'll send them a guided meditation. I'll send them a guided meditation to really help them just get grounded, get into their body, relax, and slow down. Now, when we're talking, I have to say this to myself, and I did one myself as well, because I have a hard time slowing down sometimes, but being really present in the moment and being grounded, I think, is the most important step. And I think some founders get a little bit nervous beforehand. And so all of this helps them get into a little bit more of a rhythm and a flow. I did not use flow intentionally there, but we're on a flow now, Flo.
Yeah.
And so prepping is really, really important. Now, part of the prep isn't just emotional and physical and making sure that you're not in a state of fight or flight, that you're super calm, but it's also about the preparation that you do in terms of who you're talking to, the subject matter, and maybe even having some pre-written or some stories that you've thought out beforehand. Before any celebrities go on to a talk show, they often do a pre-interview with the talk show host, and they talk about what stories they're going to talk about, and the talk show host is kind of guiding them on the story and reacting as if they've heard it for the first time, but they actually have had this conversation twice or thrice. So have those stories prepared, even if you don't have an opportunity to do a pre-interview with the host of the podcast. A lot of podcasts will do a pre-interview, will share questions up front, but it's not always the case. So no matter what, you should listen to 3 to 5 episodes, full way through, really get a sense of what that host is like, and then that'll help you feel more comfortable for the podcast. Some podcasts are a little bit more serious. Some podcasts are very silly, and if you're not prepared for a silly host and you're coming into it with a serious mentality, you may come across as super stiff or boring or worse. So getting a sense of that vibe of the podcast is so important. Making sure you're up on all the subject matter. And if that means you're the CEO and you know you're going to be asked about some stuff that you don't work on day to day, sit down with that team member who runs your engineering team or who runs your marketing team and interview them as if you're a podcast host and ask them the questions that you think you're going to be asked and take vigorous notes. And I think those are some of the most important things to do prior to a podcast. And then what is going to be your vulnerability? I think that's the thing that I always talk to people about. Some people don't need any help being vulnerable, and I have to say, actually, rein it in, please. So it's very, one-to-one, case-by-case scenario. Some people do need to be reminded that, look, we're not just talking about the company. This is an interview with 2 people, 2 humans. And humans, when you see good human connection that's interesting to watch, there's a level of vulnerability and a level of back and forth. And so we really want our founders to be ready to talk about things that they don't necessarily feel super comfortable about. And if they are a little bit more on the shy side, prepare some of those topics ahead of time and think about where you can be strategically vulnerable. And we obviously don't want it to come across as strategic, but putting it in their head in that way, that there are places you don't have to share your whole life story, but there are probably places that you could share when you did have a failure or when you did feel insecure about the direction your company was heading. And think about that and have those conversations with your wife, your partner, your co-founder beforehand, and get comfortable telling that story.
Yes, I love that. It kind of reminds me of a lot of celebrity interviews I see where they get asked the question they don't want to answer. It's like their recent breakup, the movie that didn't do well. And if it's a sit-down interview, I can tell they'll push that question down and come around with another story.
Yes.
Something else that is still intriguing and enlightening and something nobody's heard before, but it's something they're willing to share. Hey, it's Flo. Are you or your business thinking about starting a podcast? Head to our website at chorus-studios.com and fill out the contact form to start a conversation.
You see it in politics all the time. It's the classic redirect. I heard about your recent breakup. I know you've probably been having a hard time. Just wanted to check in on you. It's been pretty public and prefer not to dive into it deeply here, but one of the benefits is I got a new house. Have you ever been to Silver Lake? It's such an incredible neighborhood. I love these streets. It's the Brooklyn of LA. I'm just thinking of something off the top of my head, and you can change the conversation to Silver Lake as opposed to your recent breakup. But you can say, I don't really want to talk about that right now. It's a little fresh, and that's the personal side. But when it's a professional question, so I heard you guys might be raising another round of money. Unfortunately, my legal team won't let me comment on that. You can always blame it on a legal team or a PR person. I always remind people, blame it on me. Or there's been some murmurs that you were working on generative AI. You wanted to see if you could share any more about that. at X company, we're always thinking about the future and how we can integrate new technologies and solutions to make our product better. And we plan to do the same with every new technology that comes across our desks. So, you can answer it in a roundabout way without saying yes or no.
I love the Silver Lake bit. I'm someone who's always interested in people. I love entrepreneurship. I like music stars, actors, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about them. I'm like, where are they living? What are they doing? What's cool to them? So then if they were like, I'm moving to Silver Lake, I'd be like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't get to hear
It is
about
really
the breakup,
cute,
but like, now I can kind of imagine that they live in Silver Lake, and that's
No, it's another tip. If the viewer wanted something personal, you could still give them something personal, not exactly what the host wanted.
exactly. I think that's huge. So yeah, definitely listening to the show beforehand.
Yes.
Thinking about if there could be any tough questions, how you want to answer them, how you could answer them in a way that still feels like you're offering something like a tidbit, but it's not exactly what they asked, and it's not rude.
Yeah, that's a hard one for some people. You don't have to say no comment. You say, unfortunately, I can't speak to that right now, but you will be the first to know.
Yeah.
There's nicer ways to handle it instead of no comment. And I think some founders need to be reminded of that. It doesn't have to be so harsh.
So we've talked about tips for getting people ready for a show, and we've talked about the fact that podcasts are a different medium than some of the other mediums you might prep your clients for. You're helping them get into the mindset of the show and being more vulnerable and being a person, allowing the length of the context to be more open in a way that they're comfortable with. Do you have any stories, okay, maybe a success story from one of your clients being on a podcast, or a challenge, some specific examples of anyone you've helped or how it helped the brand?
Yeah. I have to be a little vague here, but one of our clients has a food product, and they are on a show hosted by the Food Network. And this client is very comfortable on TikTok and is very comfortable, being very vulnerable. And being on this Food Network podcast was a big opportunity for them, and helping them find a way to bring that kind of short energy that they have on TikTok to a longer form podcast was something that we spent a lot of time talking about beforehand. How do we keep the energy up the whole time without it feeling one note? We really want to have like peaks and valleys. We want a story to rise. We want to feel the crescendo. And so I think for this client in particular, they always tended to have their energy at one place. And so we prepared a lot, slowing down at certain places, taking strategic pauses. And this podcast ended up being one of the defining moments of them as an entrepreneur. And they started to be seen a little bit more seriously and seen as more than just a one product company. This podcast really helped them redefine who they were as a CEO, not just to the public, but also to themselves, and really remind themselves that I'm so much more than this individual brand that I'm known for. I wish I could share more details sometimes with the clients and NDAs in place, but that was a great one. One of our other clients was on a podcast. They were in the fintech space, and that podcast was actually listened to by someone who worked at a bigger fintech company, and they ended up discovering the company and then acquiring the company.
Wow.
So that's a great example. And this company was only about 9 months old, and they were building something in the debt management space, and they were really able to reach the key decision maker at a brand that ended up acquiring them. So I always think about, when I'm recommending to my clients what podcasts to be on, the question isn't what are the most popular, but what do we want to achieve and who do we want to reach? So first we just ask that question, what do we want to achieve? Well, we want to achieve customer acquisition. Okay, easy. Go to podcasts that your customers listen to. If we want to achieve a changed perception within the venture capital community, if we want to speak to specifically, say you're a fintech bank and you want to reach the big guys, you want to reach the people at Chase, and you want to reach the innovation people at JP Morgan, there's a different podcast for that than there is for getting consumers for your app. So really knowing what you want to achieve via the podcast is super important in even just determining what podcast you want to spend your time doing. There may be podcasts that only have 500 listeners, but if those 500 listeners are the chief intelligence officers of the big banks, and that's who you're trying to reach, that's your audience. And that's where you should be spending your time.
I love that. I love that you have that tangible real life story too, because I've had this gut feeling that podcasting can be an incredible way to asynchronously build relationships with people. What's the word? Parasocial.
Yes, parasocial relationships, yeah.
It's like celebrities. Like we feel like we know them, but they don't know us.
Yeah.
And the same thing can happen through long form content, and just getting it to the right person could be life changing.
100%. I was on a podcast called World's Ya Oyster, run by this woman named Paula, who is the head of memberships at Casa Cipriani, and she's very well connected. And I felt so vulnerable with her. We actually did the podcast in her living room. And so I'm sitting on the couch with her. And I think my employees watching that podcast and hearing me tell some of my stories that were a little bit vulnerable, some that haven't worked for me for very long, I think their perception of me shifted just from that 1 hour podcast that I had and that conversation that I had with Paula. When I'm at work and we're typically in meetings together, we're focused on achieving outcomes as opposed to telling stories and being vulnerable. And I think seeing how that changed their perception of me made me want to be more vulnerable on a daily basis in the office, because I think when people really feel like they know you, and look, psychological safety is something I talk about all the time. If you have good psych safety in the office, you're going to have a more productive team. The best teams at Google are those with the highest psych safety. They did a longitudinal study on it. So how can you make people feel more safe to be their full selves and bring their full selves to work? Bring yours and lead by example.
Oh my God, that's so huge. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
It can be really scary being an employee because sometimes you don't know what your upper management people are thinking about you. And like you feel really scared because maybe you're not having a good sales month or a good whatever month. And
you want to have an interaction with them, but you don't want it to feel forced or like you're brown nosing. Mm-hmm. So like if I can lead with a vulnerable story, or I could just start with my weekend or something stupid that I did, or for a lot of the time I talk about mistakes that I made early on in my career in PR to younger PR people, because I want them to know it's part of the process. If you're going to grow, growth happens outside of your comfort zone. You need to take some shots that you're not sure you're gonna make to build that muscle memory and take some risks. That's what I built the whole agency on. I was 27 when I started ASTRSK. It was definitely a risk. Everybody else who was running PR agencies for tech companies was 10 years older than me. The clients that started working with me took a risk on me. And when I pitched out their companies, I took a risk on the way that I talked about them and was bold and sent some crazy subject lines that got subtweeted on Twitter from journalists. And,
yeah.
I've gotten myself in hot water once or twice, but I think if you're not pushing boundaries, you're not in hot water every once in a while in PR, you're probably not working hard enough, and you're probably not challenging yourself enough.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because, we all know it's so hard to break through with any message. And
a lot of people are saying the same thing. So when I talk to clients about going onto a podcast, I say, okay, so have you listened to other podcasts with your competitors? What are they saying? Don't say the same thing as them. Let's find your left of center opinion that isn't going to piss off any of your shareholders, stakeholders, or employees. So what's the most left of center thing that you can say that's related to your industry that can't really get you in trouble with your VCs or your team? That's the kind of inflection point that we're always looking for.
Yeah, because you need attention, and attention usually comes from a little bit of, maybe not controversy, but
a new opinion. If everybody's saying the same thing, blueberries are good for you. Great, blueberries are good for you. Everybody knows blueberries are good for you. or quinoa. I'm like, let's talk about amaranth. Come on, let's talk about something else. But as long as it's related to your business, of course. I think sometimes people can go out and, for example, if you're a startup founder and you're talking about politics and your startup has nothing to do with politics, it's probably not going to help you achieve your goals. Remember, it always comes back to, is this conversation going to help me reach the people that I want to reach with the message I want to reach them with? If not, it's probably superfluous.
Thinking about connecting your personal life or your personal experiences with the business you've built is a really powerful tool as well. You had a personal experience running into the problem that you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. Getting to the heart of the why of what you're doing is massive.
Totally.
Because people then they actually believe that you're trying to do something good, which is important. You build trust.
You have to remind people often, not just your consumers, but also your employees. And reiterating that vision is something we help clients with on their internal communications as well. It's so important to reiterate that vision, whether it's at a quarterly town hall or weekly through your actions. Mm-hmm.
And then I think podcasting, like you said, it's a way to take the performer mask off a little bit. Don't lose your head, right? But it's an opportunity for folks to sit on the couch with you for an hour and who is this person? And get a little deeper. And it actually built a lot of trust, I think. And
if you can't open up like that, don't go on a podcast because you're going to come across stiff. If you have a really hard time doing it, but you think you could do it, work with a great PR professional, work with a media coach, get professional communication training, and get involved in Toastmasters. There's Toastmasters clubs in every city. You can go and you can start practicing speaking in front of people. I am somewhat of an extroverted introvert. I really like to be behind the scenes most of the time. even before this podcast, and I've done many podcasts before any interviews, I still get a little I still have a little bit of nerves. I still get a little anxious. And I think everybody's different in that regard. Some people feel so comfortable doing this all day long, and God bless them. It's not me. I have to work out this morning. I had to sleep really well. I had to make sure I was caffeinated. But I had to think about all these different factors and variables to get myself to a place where I felt comfortable and I was going to be able to perform well for you.
Oh, well, you're doing great.
Thank you.
I think, you have, in our pre-call too, you have great energy.
Thank you.
So thinking a little bit about Asterisk and like why you started the company and where you want to go. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have like a purpose or a vision for what they want to do, how they want to be different. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you started it and where you feel like you're going now.
Started the company in 2012, and I've been working at a lot of mid-sized to larger PR firms. And I had just moved to New York City, and I found that the agency that I was working at didn't really approach PR for startups in the same way that the San Francisco PR firms did. Now, San Francisco in 2012 was a hotbed of startups. New York really didn't have that many startups at the time. We were still calling it Silicon Alley. I don't know if you've heard that phrase, but that's what we used to call New York in 2012, Silicon Alley. And I was the guy from San Francisco who did PR and worked with fast-growing startups. And so I met a lot of people in New York tech, and I realized that there really wasn't a firm that was focused on early-stage startups. And so I took a risk, and I left after only 9 months at this other agency, and I had a pretty senior role. I was a VP role, and started my own agency, and pretty much undercut all the competitors. I didn't have much overhead. We didn't have an office. It was me and an intern. I made the website myself, made the logo myself. It's now been redone by Gin Lane before they turned into Pattern Brands. And I had the intern work with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I only took meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I would walk into the room with someone else. I always was trying to make myself look bigger than I was, even though we were a 2-person team and she was only part-time. We had some really great successes at the beginning. A couple of our clients were acquired. One was Grand Street, which was acquired by Etsy. I had taken some equity in the company, and that helped me put money into getting an office space, further formalizing the business. But why did I start it? I love working with startups. I love helping people who are doing something that's never been done before. Yeah. Like working with entrepreneurs is so inspiring. People every day who challenge you to think bigger. And so I've always been drawn to people who are risk takers. And then the startup world has the potential to really make the world a better place. So being able to use my superpower, which I think is helping people tell stories and connect with people, to help those that are making the world a better place. When we first started, we had a pretty strict anti-vice rule. We're like, we're never going to do any alcohol. We're never going to do any gambling. And we still are very true to that. We're really focused on startups that are making the world a better place. I'm openly gay. And earlier on in my career, I was a little bit more shy about it. And I wanted to help gay founders feel like there were more gay founders out there. I wanted to help female founders. I became involved in VC only a year after I started ASTRSK with Female Founders Fund. And that was my first investment as an LP. Wanted to lift up the voices of Black and Brown founders, wanted to lift up the voices of AAPI founders, trans founders, helping the marginalized or underrepresented founders. That is where I get a lot of my joy and fulfillment from the work that I do. And on the other side of it, it's helping young people that are my employees break through glass ceilings that they set for themselves, helping them realize that they can do more than they think they can do. And they can get to that journalist at New York Times. They just have to be really persistent, and they have to think outside the box. So why I started it was really because I love working with startups that are changing the world. Why I continue to love it is because of the impact that I can have on the people that I work with and change the ratio within founder communities and really raise the voices of more underrepresented founders.
I love that. Yeah, and it's sort of baked in that these underrepresented founders are going to be doing likely some pretty cool work because they're seeing the world from a less represented point of view.
Yeah. 100%. We have a pro bono contest every year, and it's only open to female-founded, gay-founded, LGBTQ plus founded businesses, AAPI-founded businesses, BIPOC-founded businesses. There's basically no straight white guys are allowed. Everybody else is the easier way to say it. And they win a free year of PR, and they have to have raised less than $1.5 million. They have to be early stage. And so we have a voting panel that's made up of venture capitalists and myself, and our team has a vote. And so one year, this trans startup called Both And won, and it's a clothing brand for trans masculine and non-binary people, and never really understood the problem until I met with this founder, Finn, and he really helped me understand, like, jeans don't fit my body in the same way that jeans would fit a man who is biologically born a man. I'm a trans masc man, and my hips are different. And so I wanted to build pants for other people like me so they felt really comfortable moving through the world and not having to tailor their pants every single time. Or somebody who's wearing a binder and having a shirt that was a little bit thicker to hide the binder. This brand now is like the most well-known in the trans masculine space and non-binary space, and they've really built such a strong following and community. And what they've done for their community is just so inspiring. And so I ended up angel investing after they won that year. And now they've done some incredible partnerships with celebrities and beautiful ad campaigns. And that kind of work is just very exciting for me. And we talk about like total addressable market. There are places where you can make a lot of money, and the TAM, the total addressable market, might look small on paper. Yes. But if you can own that full market, you can really build a very strong brand. I had a mentor to me one time say, and maybe it's a little uncouth, but he said, the riches are in the niches. Yes. And I think about that from time to time.
I think I heard Kris Jenner on the Kardashians say you got to look for the white space.
Yep.
Something.
Yep.
So I figured that must be a popular term.
Oh, definitely. Where is nothing happening right now? Or if there is a brand in the space, is it just so boring that we can do something better?
Totally.
For example, I have an investment in a company called Sell to Simply, and they're kind of a not so sexy brand. They buy ugly houses. Now, who's the other brand that does that in the space? WeBuyUglyHouses.com. And they have this really old branding, and they will buy any house and give you cash right away. Well, Sell to Simply gives you a better rate, and they are a cooler brand, and they're not as predatory as maybe We Buy Ugly Houses might be, because they're definitely paying more market value. And this is a brand that's a challenger brand in a space that has a really big competitor already, but they're just doing things better, more ethically, and they're doing incredible.
That's awesome. When I discover a company that is a little bit better than others that I've seen, I'm like really excited about it. And I'm like, I just stumbled upon them. I'm just lucky I happened to find them. And my experience with them was they paid me a fair rate and everything like was smoothly legal. I'm thinking about when I sold my car recently.
Yeah. Carvana?
Yes.
Or Rodra. So we represent a competitor that I think even pays better rate called Rodra, Rodra. And they're newer to the market, and they basically have shown that they pay more than Carvana on every car purchase. So
hey.
FYI, this not sponsored, but they've got the studies.
When you're thinking about taking on a new client, do you have like any sort of ethics protocol that you go through to make sure that they're someone you want to represent?
Definitely. It really comes down to, is the company making the world a better place, neutral or worse? It's only the neutrals and the better places that we'll take, because we have some gaming clients, and we want to make sure this is a game that isn't addictive, that isn't built to get kids hooked in and spend a bunch of money. And we've been in scenarios in the past before where we have worked with a gaming company and we didn't realize right away maybe that the mechanics of the game were not beneficial for young minds, and we ended up walking away from those contracts. But really, it's about like the ethics of the person, doing a deep dive, talking to them about what they're hoping to achieve. But at the end of the day, I'm not a private investigator, and I can't sometimes see what could happen in the future. We've been very, very lucky that we've never really dealt with a major crisis or any client who's done something completely unethical. There was one time where we did have a client that had bought fake users and was acquired, and they told us all the users were real. They ended up getting acquired by this big company, and it comes out later that 95% of their users were fake. And it didn't blow back on us because we were not complicit. We didn't know. But these are things that can happen. And so I definitely have stayed away from working with industries that deal with a lot of crisis comms. For example, the scooter companies, the Birds and the Limes. People were dying. People were getting seriously hurt using those. And that was something I didn't want to be involved with, because I knew that there would be crisis comms every other week on somebody getting hurt on one of these vehicles. And it's just too much of a downer, and not the kind of PR that I want to do. I want to do creative outside the box PR, not responsive PR about some sad things that happened. Yeah,
it's my understanding that there are people who really just do crisis, right? They know how to do that. And it's not necessarily they're bad for doing that. It's just like that's what they offer, and
100%.
That's fine.
And it's the people who can watch scary movies and not have bad dreams, not me.
Me too. I'm the same. All right, my last question. So if you had a client who wanted to start a monthly podcast audio show, in general, what advice would you give them, or would you encourage that, or like, what do you think about that concept?
I'd start with a bunch of questions. How much time do you realistically have? Who are you trying to reach? Do you have a team that can help you pull this together? Do you have a list of topics and guests that you'd want to interview? Do you have a strong perspective that you want to get across? Are you able to refrain from saying politically incorrect, or are you able to watch your mouth? And basically, I'll know this client by this time already. You know, if I find they have some weird controversy theories or conspiracy theories or too strong of political views, I'll probably stop them before they even ask me the question and say, look, this is probably not the right place for you, because I don't want their personal politics or alien conspiracy theories to be what people are talking about.
Right.
But if they answer the questions in the right way, look, like, I've got the time, I know who I want to reach, and I have the network of people that have big enough names that we can leverage their network effect and reach their audiences, I'll say, let's give it a try. But I'll ask again, are we sure this is not taking you away from any crucial business activities that are going to slow down the growth of your business? Because this is not it's not a small time commitment. Even if you have a whole team running it and you have someone like you that helps put the whole thing together and they just have to show up, there still is that prep they have to do. There still is those couple hours a week. There's still edits that need to be approved. I'd say on the lightest end, if you're doing a monthly podcast, you should think about 4 to 6 hours a month that you're going to be spending on this, at least at the beginning. And if that sounds like too much of a time commitment, let's just stop the conversation here. And maybe we go into other people's podcasts and we can still leverage podcast strategy without building our own. I don't think everybody needs their own podcast. We definitely do have more podcasts than ever. It's harder to find audiences for podcasts, especially for a new one. But again, if you have a good network yourself already on social media, and if you have a great network of other founders and people that would be willing to come on your show, these are all signals that we're going to have a better chance than someone who has no network themselves and has no friends that have networks.
Right. And I think the other thing to consider is, like, you do have more control over the content when it's your own show and the narrative. So you get to ask the questions that are maybe really relevant to the product you're building.
Definitely. And if there is no niche podcast in that space and you are the domain expert, say it's like something very interesting like longevity, and we've worked with a couple clients in the longevity space, there are some really popular longevity podcasts out there, and there are some men who are talking about this, like, it's mostly men that are talking about this topic. Probably not the right space to start a podcast. But if you are doing something in AI and you're leveraging AI for social good, there's probably not tons of AI podcasts right now. There's definitely more than a handful, but we're still at this kind of nascent stage of AI where if you're talking about something completely different and you have a different spin than the other AI podcasts, and you have the time to do it, and you have the audience, and you have other friends that have audiences, go ahead and give it a shot. And I think if you're going to give it a shot, you have to give it at least 6 episodes.
Yeah, I say 8 to 10.
Yep.
To make it feel like a real season.
Totally.
What we've done with my client is break down different areas that the business touches in the renewable energy, modernizing the power grid. It's so complicated and massive that each episode has been a different concept or aspect of that, and a different
I'm fascinated by that. I need to listen because I'm like always shocked when people are like, the power grid's out in Texas. I'm like, how is this 2024? And our
I know.
What's going on?
I don't know. It's such a complex topic and it requires so much specialty knowledge that it has helped our founder with hiring and fundraising.
That's great.
We don't have a huge audience, but I think of it more as like branded content, like YouTube series, but it's just a pod. But we do video and audio, and then we use snippets and
amazing.
Yeah.
And you can slice and dice and use it for ads. You can use it on social media. You can use it on TikTok. I definitely think that the more content you can create, if it is unique, interesting, and is reaching your audience, you should create as much as you possibly can. Like, as founders now, if you can be a great content creator, you're going to go farther and you're going to have more opportunities.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. And also, I think, it does depend on the person. I mean, I had known the founder for a while before I was like, you should have a podcast, because he's he's like a professor. Like, he's always researching things. He's doing this stuff, talking to people and researching things anyway, related to the industry. So I kind of felt like we need to show off your
take these conversations you're having over the dinner table and bring them to a wider audience.
Yeah. He says it's been helpful. I like to think of it sort of as startups will make a business case video for YouTube. They'll spend 20 grand on it, 30 grand on it. It's maybe a 2 to 5 minute video, 10 max. And they show it to their investors. They show it to their team. It's like that, but it's longer format is how I think about it.
Well, and people know when they're watching an ad. That's one of the great things about PR is that it doesn't feel contrived in the same way an ad does. There's this like old quadrant of PR, marketing, branding, and advertising. And advertising is like, he's a great lover, but PR is more like, I've heard he's a great lover, and it's that third party endorsement that I think is so interesting. And a lot of people don't realize, okay, there's a PR person behind the scenes telling that journalist that they should really write about this company, but it comes across very different than an ad. And I think podcasts versus a long form video that's super produced are that same thing. It feels a lot more genuine, and people are really responding to raw content now. The algorithm on Instagram really is all about talking to the camera and raw content, not this uber produced influencers that we saw in years past. Mm-hmm. That grittiness and that reality is something that's prioritized by the algorithm now. So we need to create content that's going to help us reach those audiences and takes the algorithm into account.
Yeah, it's wild trying to keep up with that algorithm. I've pretty much given up. I mean, if somebody wants to help me, that'd be great. But I just try to create great content, great story.
Great shareable content, because that's what the CEO came out recently said. He said it's so much more about how many shares you got and how many saves you got on Instagram than it is about how many likes or comments you got. It's really like that is what the algorithm is looking for: shareable, savable content.
Shareable, savable, yeah.
So create something that gives value to someone they want to share with their friends.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we talked about your pro bono contest. Maybe I'll apply one year.
Yes. Please do. It opens up usually in March. Mimi Chang's just won this year. They're celebrating their 10-year anniversary, and they've got some big news coming out. They're going to be expanding into a different industry. So we've got some big news coming out for them. And if you're in New York City, Mimi Chang's is incredible dumplings. They have everything from like traditional Taiwanese dumplings to steak and mac and cheese dumplings. So it's like very cool.
Whoa.
And it's sister founded. They're Taiwanese. It's like their family story and their family recipe. It's a very, very cool thing. And they're really working to raise the voices of other AAPI founders through food and through building this business. It's a very cool company.
Sounds so creative. I love when people are creative and they do it well.
They did a collaboration with Peter Luger at one point. So they had like this steak dumpling that was incredible. And it's all like organic and it's healthier for you. So that's a lot of fun. You can always apply. And you can follow us at ASTRSK PR on Instagram. And we always announce our contest about a couple weeks before it goes live. And applications are always open for a month.
Cool. Well, I think we've got a lot of great tangible takeaways for our audience who might be interested in doing their best job on a podcast as a guest. And also for folks who are just interested in PR and how you navigate podcasting. So thank you so much for your time.
Of course, it's been so much fun, Flo.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was fun.
I love it. It's at 2 p.m. on a Friday. I'm like, I only have a couple more emails to send after this. In New York, we do summer Fridays, so we always end at 3. So this is the best way to start my summer Friday.
Thank you for listening to The Format. Head to substack.com, that's substack.com, to subscribe to The Format on Substack for our next monthly episode and blog about the future of podcasting. Stay real.